All right. Hi. Hello. Good morning. This is a slightly different view for us. Also, I have my mic on, so if the audio sounds different, that is exactly why. I was filming clips for something else. I needed this intro, so here we are. Welcome back. Happy Friday, everyone. And I do hate to say it, but this is our last Night of the Seven Kingdoms video for a few days, a few weeks, a minute. Actually, it's not going to be that long now that I think about it, because I will be doing some stuff in our San Diego videos, because you know I'm making a Con Crunch video and you know I'm vlogging. So yeah, I'm gonna sit down now. Anyways, today we are working on Lyonel's crown. Funnily enough, the person that inspired us to finally do these costumes for San Diego that we saw at WonderCon actually reached out to me and was like, oh, I saw you're making a Genderbent Lyonel. Do you want the 3D file that I used for my crown? And I was like, yes, because you were so easy to spot in a crowd, and it was like, it was so easy to know, like, oh, there's that Lyonel. Oh, yep, okay, let's go see that Lyonel. And so they were kind enough to send that over to me. However, my 3D printer has been broken for like 2 years now. I really just need to get a new one. I don't have time to go to a library and sit and wait for a 3D print to finish. I can just make it out of foam and clay and Worbla. Okay, so we're gonna do the base crown, foam, cover that in Worbla, and then I'm actually going away and I'm camping for the rest of this week. It's the 4th of July. Yay, happy country, whatever. So I will be able to do the antlers there. So as long as I can get the foam crown and the Worbla on top of it and some sort of base structure for the antlers so that they don't just break off immediately, because I am just using Crayola air dry clay because I have a bunch of it left over from last year's San Diego, actually. Yeah, we should be good. Oh my God, I have been filming for the last like 3 hours, so I'm just gonna jump into it and we're gonna go straight to the garage now.
Well, I guess we're jumping right into it in the garage. So I started out by making my very basic pattern. I made an L shape, and I'm only going to draft half of the pattern because I can just cut out two. But I did measure around my head and then add a little bit of extra space, and I should have added a little bit extra more, but I'm just dividing that up in half again, so now it's in fourths. And then I'm deciding on the width and then getting the half of it. And then I know it has this little trim on the edge, so I'm adding 1/8 of an inch there. And then I'm going to freehand draft the first part of the pattern before going in with this kind of see-through paper that I have and retracing it so that I can get that design flipped and then make a very basic pattern for myself to just keep flipping and repeating along the entire length. And once I did have that entire pattern drawn out down the length of the crown pattern, I did make myself a inverted pattern so that I could sketch these all out onto the foam before going in and cutting them out with an X-Acto knife. I cut an even amount and then I started gluing them together just so that I could double check exactly how many I was going to need because I didn't draft the full pattern. It was kind of a guessing game. And I did just go through and lay them down the pattern, and I gave up taping pretty quickly, but I was just hot gluing them together. I know I'm going to be covering this all in Worbla anyways, so it doesn't need to be super exact. I just need to have this bit of layering on the base of the crown for the Worbla to go over to make it easier later to get details. The base of the crown was just one layer of like 2mm craft foam, I think, that I had just had some sheets laying around, and then I hot glued on the edge details before laying out the entire design and taping the middle in place and going to one edge and hot gluing all the way around and making sure it's all stuck down nicely. I then pulled out all of my scraps of Worbla because I knew I had a ton laying around, and I gotta say, this is probably the last project I can do with these. It was crumbling so bad, but I did work through it, and I just slowly heated it up and wrapped it around. The inside is not pretty at all, and this was way more hassle than it should have been, but I just worked slowly and steadily. I like using the caps of pens to get in the little details and push the Worbla down in. I'm not ruining any tools, and it's pretty nice. but I got it all covered, and then I actually went in with the air dry clay that I'm going to use for the antlers, and I filled in some really rough spots on the actual crown itself because I know it's going to be mostly clay later, so I may as well just use it as filler right now. And this is a water-based clay, so I did smooth it out with a little bit of water after kind of pushing it into the cracks and imperfections with the end of this paintbrush. Now for the base of the antlers, I have these sticks of Werbla that is basically scraps that I have rolled into sticks, and I just kind of took a few pieces that were the same length and I started using other Werbla scraps to hold them together, and I just started putting them together in the general shape. I did end up going over all of the seams with hot glue to make sure that they were extra stuck, and then I slowly started layering on this clay. I would put on a thin layer and then I would let it completely dry. It was really hot in my garage this week, so that actually helped a bit, other than the fact that it was cracking because it was drying so quickly. So I was going back in and painting it with water to reintroduce some moisture every now and then. But I was going little layer by layer, going in and smoothing out with water, adding more clay and gaps or cracks and filling in and making it more even, thicker in some places. I just did that repetitively for a few days, I'm gonna be honest. To finish it out, I did do a little bit of sanding. The sandpaper got really full of the clay, so I was wiping it on the rag constantly. And then for the bigger spots that needed taken down, I did go in and kind of chip away with the X-Acto knife, which worked better than the sandpaper, I'm not gonna lie. The Werbla on the crown did crack, so I did have to go in on a couple spots and use hot glue to reinforce it. I wasn't trying to make it pretty, and I wanted the inside to be really reinforced, so the inside is pretty much all hot glue. And I used my classic whatever glue Mod Podge I had laying around, which happened to be this glossy stuff, to seal it all in. I ended up sealing the base Werbla first before painting it black, and then resealing it just so it's all one even tone. Now, for the texture on the antlers, I just used the hot glue gun and I did long strips, and then there are a few sections that I did some little extra detailing. And then I went back in and I resealed it once more with more Mod Podge. The painting was really fun because it was a lot of dry brushing, and I really like dry brushing, but I also tried to use my airbrush for quite a bit of this. I don't have a good airbrush brown, which is really disappointing, but it ended up being totally fine. So I just went through and I gave it all a base brown. I added quite a bit of black to it to make it a little darker. And I did, once again, just go in and make sure everything was super even before I moved on to the actual dry brushing. And I started by dry brushing on a slightly lighter brown to just add a little bit of depth to the base color before I went in with this lovely vanilla paint that's very bone color. And I went in and I dry brushed just everywhere, and I tried to get it pretty light, honestly. I was dry brushing, so it was getting pretty much just the texture, but I did go through on a few spots and darken it, or lighten it, I suppose. But I got a very even coat all across this, even though I know I want the tips to be lighter. But I figured I would try out my airbrush. I only have a white for the airbrush, and it ended up totally fine because I did also dilute it with water quite a bit, so it wasn't too opaque, and I could still have some of that texture underneath. Once that was all dry, I did just go back in and really lighten up the tips with more of that vanilla. And I did go in with some watered down vanilla to get it really in all of the cracks that are on the points of the antlers. And I'm just dabbing away excess and cleaning off the brush and then blending that in and down further. My favorite part of this, honestly, this is where it really tied it in, was I dry brushed some dark brown that was mixed with black along these kind of ridges that I put in with the hot glue to indicate where these new sections of antler are growing off of I don't know if this is accurate or not. I did not look at any antler reference photos while I was doing this, I'm going to be completely honest, but it looked really good, and I kind of dragged it up a little bit where I knew it was going to be slightly darker because they scratch the velvet off of their antlers, and so that's why they're like slightly brown and slightly white. It's like a whole thing in nature, but I think I did an okay job of replicating that from memory. For the crown, you can see a little bit of gold on there, and that was me just testing out the gold airbrush to see if it was going to be opaque enough to do just by itself, and it was not. So I did go in with some gold paint before going back in with the gold airbrush after all of this paint was done. And I did paint this from the top and then flipped it upside down and painted from the bottom so that I could make sure I got in all of the little cracks and crevices, and I made sure the inside was also super covered. If you've been around here long enough, you've definitely seen me do weathering with my favorite enamel wash, which I cannot find anywhere. So we are making our own today, and I'm just using brown and black, mostly black, and very watered down, so it's really liquidy. And I paint on, and then I dab off with a tissue, and then I paint on, and then I dab off with a tissue. And it does come to a point where I decide to just make this really dark and just throw all of the paint on before letting it sit for a second and then dabbing it off. And I pretty much didn't dab off where it is in those deep parts because I want this to be really dramatic and look super drama, because that's what we're going for. We're not going for accuracy, we're going for drama here. I also ended up covering the antlers in paper to finish the crown. I'm glad I did because it kept it separated to do a gloss top coat on the crown, and then I switched it and I covered the crown in paper and did a matte top coat on the antlers. So that was really helpful, and I also did some airbrushing, and then I also did some rub and buff, which was really unnecessary. I didn't need to do that at all. This was like too much gold. I was trying to get it really shiny. I didn't need to. It was totally fine with just the paint, but it looks really good still, so yay!
Okay, I didn't show it, but I did in fact go in with two separate top coats, a glossy on the gold and a matte on the antlers, and ta-da! We have it. It's a little bit tight on my head, but Lexi's head is much smaller than mine, and it's also like, it's not like it needs to be like so far down. And it doesn't feel egregiously heavy. Like, for a party day costume, these eat so hard. And I have this shirt. I have the rest of it here. I'm actually gonna put it on real fast. I'm not gonna put on a wig or anything. You're just gonna have to deal with it. But I will throw on at least the shirt and the waist corset so we can get the vibe. Also, I'm not taking off my Elizabeth necklace because why would I? I feel like I can't like, not that I can't, like I just feel like I can't like, oh yeah, see? I feel like I can't like move my head fast. It's also not centered on my head, I've realized. Is this a good look? Is this the look? Maybe if I just took it off, this would be easier, but I'm not putting on the display piece, especially since it's just fallen on the ground with everything else. This also isn't my waist corset, so one moment. Okay, it's not tied, and I'm literally just tucking it up under the waist corset, but I was trying to put it on way too low. My boobs aren't built for this, but do you see it? Do you see the vision? This is Lyonel dressing Arian up in his clothes. Love, love. I was actually debating today when I was finishing this if it would have been easier to 3D print the file that I was sent or if this was easier, and I genuinely can't decide because I would have had to do a lot of filling and sanding and waiting if I 3D printed it. So compared to just like literally putting on clay and then waiting for it to dry. So that's it. We'll do another 360. I hope you learned something. This feels like a good craft that anyone could do if they really wanted to, like truly air dry clay on like some sticks. Perfect. And I will say, I realized this morning I did in fact do the painting on the antlers backwards. They should be white underneath, the white ivory, and then the brown dry brushed on top, but it was too late at that point. So this is what they look like. And I think they look good. I think I achieved the like, you know, all of the because when the antlers grow in, they grow with velvet on them. And then they shed that off and it's the white keratin underneath. So it always gets more white on the ends. I did this purely off of memory, but I took a wildlife biology class in high school. So that's what we're basing this off of. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. And thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! I'm gonna go film some TikToks now.